Welcome again to B207A. We are still in block 1. The block 1 title is innovation, and we are still now in the second business function for this semester, which is operations management. We are discussing now process design. Now, let me ask you, before we get started, let me refresh your memory a little bit. What is a process? Can anyone answer this question? What do we mean by the word process? I'm still waiting for an answer.
Income and outcome, and transaction from income and outcome to outcome.
Okay, so the process is something that happens. It's a method. It's a set of activities that happen. So you give it what? What do you give the process?
The outcomes.
The
outcome
input.
model.
Yes, you give it the
yes.
input, and it gives you the outcome or the output. Exactly. Thank you. Okay, so a process is a way, it's the set of activities in which we do things. Okay, so let's think about the process inside Subway, for example. Okay, or البيك. البيك might be, you might buy more sandwiches from البيك, so it might be more familiar. So inside البيك, what does it happen inside the process for the meals to be prepared, for the meals to be starting from the raw material until it reaches the outcome, which is the final meal that the customers are getting. Okay, so everything that involves the preparation of the output is part of the process. All right, so last time we talked about product design. In the previous session, we talked about how we design a product like a certain chair, a certain table, a certain electronic device, anything, how we make the design for it, the new product development. But today, we will talk about the process design. Process design is part of your TMA. In your TMA, we are asking you about a process innovation. So the decisions that you make and how you are going to set up your process will enable you to innovate. All right? So inside your process, you could say, I want to save time. I want to save time on labor. I want to save money. So any problem you attempt to solve inside your process is considered an innovation. Okay? If you do things differently, if you do things in a way that give you some value, that give you some benefits, then this will be beneficial for the organization, and it's considered to be innovation. So here we are going to talk about the design of a process. Process design is for the set of activities associated with organizing the resources needed to effectively produce the product or service. So the resources that you have, so let's say you have machineries, you have employees, and you have time. Because, you have a specific time to produce your products. You can't spend 1 hour producing this sandwich, correct? So you want to organize, you want to set up all your resources in a way that produces your products and services efficiently and effectively. So the challenge is not only to design a process that is physically capable of making the product or providing the service, but to design it in a way that takes all aspects of operations, performance, cost, speed, quality, and etc. into account. So we need to take into account that we want to produce the right quality products in a fast way, okay? And in an inexpensive way. We want to reduce in the cost. So we have so many things to take care of. It's not enough for me to say, I want to produce the chicken sandwich. No, I have to produce the right quality chicken sandwich in 1 minute because, you know, if I don't do that, the line at Al Baik will become very long. Okay, so Al Baik has a certain time limit to produce each meal or each sandwich or whatever. Okay, so we have what we call the operations performance. Let's look at the process choice that you should make. What are the operations performance, such as the quality, speed, and the cost? So as you are designing your process, we need to understand the 4 V's, and this is step 1. In step 1, we understand the design factors. What are the design factors that will affect my process design? I need to understand the volume. What do we mean by volume here? Anybody can answer this question? What does volume mean? Okay. The word volume, yes, anyone?
Could be quantity.
The quantity, absolutely, yes. This is what it means. The word volume means the quantity that I am producing. Okay, now think about a restaurant or a fast food chain that produces very big amounts of sandwiches versus another chain that produces a smaller amount. The process design will be different. Okay? So in other words, depending on how much you are going to produce, you are going to have your process designed, صح؟ يعني التشينز المطاعم اللي عندهم فوليوم كبير في عندهم بروسيس داخلي غير عن المطاعم اللي عندهم فوليوم او طلب صغير على المنتجات تبعهم صح؟ ممكن if you have a high volume you will need more machines, you will depend more on يعني bigger equipment and bigger machines. If you have a smaller volume on the other hand, then maybe you don't have to invest in these machines. Your employees can do the work. All right. So the first one, volume, there is a key differences in how processes are designed based on the scale. Okay. Based on the scale, يعني based on the quantity. For example, in a fast food outlet, the process is designed to produce large volumes of almost identical meals. This is achieved by using automated equipment and dedicating staff to specific roles within the overall process. So the example of Al Baik, definitely Al Baik has very big volume, all right? So the Al Baik has dedicated staff to make each and every activity. يعني بيجيبوا شخص employee مسؤول عن ممكن شغلة واحدة. Okay? But if we have a smaller volume, the same employee will be doing many things at the same time because we can't afford to get a lot of employees. So in a fast food outlet, it helps achieve the repeatability and standardization needed for the volume of work. By contrast, in a boutique restaurant, the volume of the work may be lower. So a smaller restaurant, we have lower quantities and there will be less systemization. يعني this systemization will be less. التكرار الأشياء اللي عم تنعمل مثل بعضها حتكون أقل ب smaller restaurants. Staff might be expected to perform more than one type of role. So the same employee might be doing more than one thing. And this type of operation often relies on the skill and the flexibility of staff in a way not seen in the fast food outlet. Okay, so definitely you can imagine it. Higher volume will lead to more employees. Each employee will be responsible for only one thing. Okay, on the other hand, a lower volume would lead to less systemization and less standardization. الأشياء بتصير less standard. هيكون أكثر طلب كل شخص more unique يعني ممكن يكون عنده اختلافات بالطلب اللي بده يطلب. أوكي طيب السؤال هون what do you think if we have a high volume do you have a higher cost per unit or do you have a lower cost per unit? شو بيأثر الفوليوم على الكوست؟
Can you have more?
If you have more, if you are producing more, النتيجة حتكون cost عالي ولا cost خفيف؟
High cost.
Lower cost, excellent. Excellent. This is exactly what we call economies of scale. شو يعني economies of scale؟ في مبدأ بالبزنس when we produce the same item in big quantities, we can reduce the cost of the item. Okay? يعني البيك is the biggest example here, is the best example. Because البيك produces huge amounts of the meals, they can afford to sell their meals for lower than the competitors because the cost is lower. Okay? If you open the same concept of البيك, a small business, the same concept of البيك, you will not afford to sell in for the same prices because your cost will be higher unless you can reach the same volume. Okay? Now, the second factor is called the variety. Okay? Notice, I want to repeat, we look at these factors because we want to design our process. Before designing our process, we need to think about how much volume we have. The second thing we want to think of is how much variety we have. Okay, now variety means customization. So we have a variety of products. Okay, we have مثلا على المنيو بيكون عندنا أصناف متنوعة, أصناف different. Okay, so variety adds complexity. Your operation, your process will become more complex if you have different types of products to produce. So if you are selling chicken and pizza and pasta, if you are selling many things at once, you need more machines, you need more employees, it's more complex. Okay, but if you stick to chicken, for example, you only sell chicken meals or chicken sandwiches, this is not a high variety. This is a low variety. It's lower cost for the business to have a lower variety. Okay? So high variety often limits the extent to which a process can be automated. يعني if you want to spend the time and resources on producing many different types of products, you will become slower. You will become, your process will become more costly, more expensive. Okay, this is what we mean by variety, is the variety of items that you have, that you can provide to your customers. Number 3 is variation in demand. What do we mean by variation in demand? Many operations are designed to produce approximately the same quantity of output per day. Okay, so imagine you have a factory. Your factory produces plastic bottles, for example. Okay, your factory has a certain capacity. So you have set your factory to produce, let's say, 10,000 units per day. Okay, this production will be the same every single day, during the days of the week, during the hours. You have a continuous process that produces this number of plastic bottles. Okay? Here we have zero variation. Why do we have zero? يعني ما عندنا اختلافات بالتصنيع. We are producing every day the same amount of bottles. Okay? طيب. Now think about, let's go back to our example, al-bake. Do you think al-bake has different demand during hours of the day, or during days of the week, or even months of the year? Do you think there is a high variation or a low variation at a business like al-bake?
A low variation because it depends on the chicken products.
Because he depends on what?
Chicken products.
Yes, that was the example of variety, the previous one. Okay? Because they only have chicken, al-bake has a low variety. Okay? بس أنا يعني هلا عم أسأل لو الطلب بيختلف during the hours of the day or during the days of the week، هل الطلب بيختلف عند البيك أو على طول نفس كمية الطلب موجودة؟
لا بيختلف.
أكيد يختلف. So في أوقات حيكون very busy, very crowded، حيكون high variation in demand. يعني في اختلاف كبير بالديماند. وفي أوقات رح يكون slow. بتدخل على البيك بيكون في قدامك شخصين مثلا ولا شيء، صح؟
Yes.
Yes. So for this reason, al-bake cannot keep on producing the same amount of chicken meals all the time. Al-bake has to wait and check for check for the demand before they produce. So here we have more complexity to the operation. يعني حيكون شوي أصعب لنقدر نقدر كم حيكون الطلب. أوكي؟ بس بينما المصنع اللي على طول عم يصنع البلاستيك bottles is producing the plastic bottles because it has orders. يعني they know they have orders that they want to fulfill. They don't have to meet the orders now. Maybe next month the plastic bottles will be shipped. Okay, so it's different with the fast food restaurant where they have a variation in demand. يعني نحن مش بكل ساعة عم نبيع نفس الاماونت أو عم نحضر نفس الاماونت، رح يختلف the demand between for example lunchtime or afternoon or morning time, even between weekend and weekdays there is a variation. يعني في فروقات بين الأوقات. Okay, so if you have high variation, there is more complexity added to your process. Okay, حيكون في شو يعني complexity بالعربي؟
تعقيد أو معقد.
Exactly. رح يكون البروسس معقد شوية زيادة. رح يكون معقد ليش؟ لأن you will use your knowledge. You will use your forecasts. You will make some guesses about how much you will sell every day. طبعا البيك هو بزنس ما شاء الله متكامل و they know exactly how much they need to sell. بس نحن عم نعطي أمثلة على أي يعني محل تاني. Let's say an ice cream shop. الايس كريم شوب ما فيهم يعرفوا كم حيجيهم demand بكل ساعة من النهار. اوكي so هو حيكون صعب عليهم. sometimes ممكن يحضروا ايس كريم أكتر. okay more ice cream that they don't sell. sometimes they prepare less ice cream and they have customers with no ice cream. okay they are short on their products يعني. So this is why higher variation will lead to more complexity. Okay, now the fourth one is called visibility. Just as the name implies, the word visibility, يعني I can see what's going on in the process. If the customer can see the process, it means we have high visibility. If the customer cannot see the process, it means we have a low visibility. Okay, there are many restaurants that you go to that have high visibility. You can see how they prepare your food. This is a higher visibility. Okay, if you are the customer of Zara, for example, you don't see how your clothing were prepared, were made. Okay, this is low visibility operation. So most of the time when you order a product, you do not see that item being made in the factory. There is a large degree of separation between the customer and the process itself. Okay, but some operations want you to see, especially in services and in restaurants, they want you to see how your service is prepared. So in this case, we have higher visibility. Again, higher visibility will lead to higher complexity because you want to have everything very well made in front of the customer, and the customer himself will add this complexity. The complexity will add cost on your operation. Okay, any questions regarding the 4 V's? So these 4, we call them the 4 V's of operation, and they influence on how I will make the process design, how I decide to design my process. Okay, if I know that the customer is going to see my process, I will design it in a different way than if the customer is not going to see anything. Okay. So here we have an example of 4 V's, the banking example. Of course, in banks, we have many services in bank. Okay, you can use the ATM, you could use the website to transfer money or to pay bills. You could call the bank, or you could visit the bank, or you could have a personal banker or advisor. Okay, so notice I started with the service that it has the least amount of visibility. Okay, but it has the highest amount of volume. All right. So for the ATM, the visibility is very low. You don't see anything. You just ask the machine to give you cash, and that's it. You don't see how things are being done. You are not exposed very much to the service. Okay, there are low variations as well, because during the day, at any time, people are withdrawing money from the ATM. Also, there is a low variety. There are not many things that you can do at an ATM. You can only withdraw money, and some ATMs allow you to deposit money. That's it. You can't open a bank account. You can't do a transaction. You can't pay a bill. There are many things that you cannot do usually with an ATM. Okay, so, but it has a high volume. A lot of people use the ATM. We use the ATM more than we visit the branch. Okay, so as you go to the left, things will change. Things will become more visible, okay, and more, they will have more variety and more variation and a lower volume, okay? So how many people do you think have a personal banker? Very few. Very few people would have a personal banker, but almost everyone would withdraw money from the ATM. Okay, this is why there is a difference here between the volume. Here we have a high volume for the ATM, and here we have a very low volume for the personal banker. Okay, so as you can see, this is the same business, it's the same bank, but the bank has to design different processes, okay, for different services. It's not the same process. It's different processes. So here we have 5 different processes. Each process will take into consideration the 4 V's in order to make the process in a good way. Okay, is this example clear?
Clear.
Okay, great. Okay, so now in step 2, you have to choose the process, the type of process that you are going to use. We have your process could be a project or jobbing process or batch process or mass or continuous process. Okay, we will go through these and I will explain them one by one. What is a project? What do we mean by the word project? مشروع, right? Usually, a project is unique. Usually, if you take a project, you do it once. You don't really repeat it. It's not like you are producing the chair, this chair that you have to repeat the same chair so many times. With a project, you are doing this process only once, but usually it's very big. The requirements of the project are big and are unique to the project. Okay, projects are usually characterized by their complexity, long time scale, large scale, and the involvement of multidisciplinary teams. You have teams from different, so this is an example of a project. For example, here they are making a bridge. You need teams, you need specialists, you need people from different types of specialties. Project managers work with considerable degrees of autonomy when compared with managers working in other operations environments. Okay, now let's talk about the 4 V's of this project. Okay, what about the volume? Is the volume high or low? The volume is very low. You are producing one project only, right? You are producing one project. What about the variety? The variety is high, okay? Because the project is very special and what it needs to be done specifically on this water, for example, specifically in this location. So there is a high degree of variety that you would not see in any other project. Okay? The variation is low as well. There should not be variation with the plan that you intend to make your project. Okay, now the next process is called jobbing. Jobbing processes have some elements in common with project processes. So this guy here, he makes these chairs. Okay, so you could ask him to make maybe 10 of these chairs at the same time to you. Okay, so the guy cannot make a very big volume. They will make a small job, which is a small project, but it's repeated several times. It's repeated a small number of times. All right. So also, this job has something in common with the project, because this chair is specifically set to your criteria as the customer. Okay, so the guy will not make the same chair to anyone else, but he will make 10 or 12 chairs just for you. Okay, so it's related to a project, but on a higher volume. Okay, and more repetition. It has a more repetition than the project. Okay, also one difference between the jobbing and the project is that the jobbing will have some material associated with it. Like, for example, the wood, okay, will be already available at the shop. While for the project, you have to buy all the materials that you need for the project, specifically for the project. The next one is called a batch. A very high proportion of manufacturing is performed as batch production. Okay, batch يعني مجموعة. All right, so in a bakery, you will make the first batch, for example, white bread. The second batch will be, let's say, brown bread. Okay, third batch will be bread with nuts, for example. Okay, but each batch will give you a big amount of bread. Okay, same with clothing. When you manufacture clothes, you make the first batch color green, size medium, for example. Okay, second batch color green, size large, and so on. Okay, so in a batch, also we have a higher volume than jobbing. Okay, and we have less variation. The next process is called mass processes. The word mass is that we have a huge number of items produced. So here, it makes sense for you to buy machineries, to buy all these machines that make your product. This Coca-Cola bottling factory is a great example because it keeps on producing Coca-Cola. So maybe each couple of hours, they will change this line to another flavor, maybe. Okay, but very not as often as the batch changes the production. Okay, so mass processes normally involve the use of larger amounts of automation and technology. You need here technology, you need automation, with many of the jobs within the process having been simplified to some extent. Lastly, we have what we call the continuous process. What is a continuous process? It's a process that never stops. Okay, that never stops. This is the example of a process that continuously works. It produces huge volume, okay, such as the oil refineries, paper mills, soap powder factories. Usually they are working 24 hours a day with very little downtime. The products from these facilities are not seen as many units of discrete items, but as one continuous stream of outputs. Okay, it's continuous, it doesn't stop. Once the facility is properly set up, it can operate often for many months without stopping. Okay, so here you are producing the same product over and over and over with no stop. Now, for services also you have processes. You have the professional services, the work of architects, auditors, lawyers, accountants. All of these are professional services. Doctors also, for example, okay? They are dealing with relatively low volume because at the end, they depend on their skill that they have enough time to produce this skill. The service shops. Some services have to deal with some inherent variability in what the customer wants from their service experience. Okay? For example, a supermarket is a service shop. You go to the supermarket, they provide a service for you. They display all their products, okay? And you get to choose. If you go to the supermarket and look at people's carts, each cart will be different. Each cart will be totally different than the other carts, okay? So there is a high degree of variability here. Mass services. Some services have to operate at high volume and allow work or customers to progress steadily through the system with as little delay as possible. Mass services are examples like trains, buses, airlines, Disneyland. They provide the service for a big number of people. So these services must process people quickly and find ways to make it easier for people to pass through the service. Okay, so here are the processes that we discussed. As you can see, a project has high variety and low volume. And as you go down, okay, things will change. Jobbing has a lower variety and a higher volume, right? Batch has medium variety and medium volume, okay? And so on. This tells us that you cannot have high volume and high variety. You cannot have a process here. It's hard. It's hard to have high variety with high volume. Okay? Okay, now we have a question. The question says, what are the implications if demand starts with very low volumes and increases over time? So suppose you have a small business and you have a low volume, but over time, so you have set your process accordingly. But then after 1 year, your volume became bigger. What do you do if your volume became bigger? Will you still choose the same process or will you change your process? You will change it, absolutely. Yes. How will you change it? So if you had a low volume and then the demand for your product increased, you have higher volume, maybe you might want to buy more machines. Maybe you will want to hire more people to be able to make this higher volume. Maybe you want to rent a bigger place. Okay, so in most cases, the answer is yes. Yes, you will change your process as your demand is increasing. Market growth or decline, يعني كمان the opposite is correct. If you had high volume, بعدين صار low volume. كمان same thing. Often presents a big challenge for the design of operations. You cannot normally expand low volume facilities just by keeping the same configuration, but making it bigger. Okay, sometimes you have to change the whole process because your the demand for your products have changed. Okay, so the move from batch production to mass production is also a major step involving process-wide change and changes to skill sets, the use of technology and job design. Okay, يعني if we go back to this chart, okay, so if you are doing a jobbing process, you can move to the batch process if the demand for the products become higher, okay, or vice versa, the opposite, if the demand for your product became less. Okay, now here you have an activity for you to do at home. You can go to session 12, process design, and go through the course material and the activities in sessions 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3. They will give you many examples that will help you understand the concepts much better, this process design. Okay. Are there any questions?